When the avoidant understands you are never replaceable, there comes a moment, a rare, disarming moment when someone who pushed you away realizes they didn't just lose someone, they lost you. Not just another option. Not someone who could easily be swapped out with the next person who smiled their way. No, they lost someone irreplaceable. See, people with avoidant tendencies don't always recognize value in the present. They protect themselves by pushing intimacy away, by keeping people at a distance. They confuse closeness with danger, so they choose space over connection, and maybe you tolerated that for a while. You gave grace, you gave time, you showed up, even when their walls kept you out. But there comes a day when you stop knocking. You walk away not with anger, but with clarity. Clarity that says, I'm not here to prove my worth to someone committed to misunderstanding it. And here's the part they never see coming. When you leave, not to manipulate, not to teach them a lesson, but because you finally choose yourself, something shifts. They start to feel the absence, not just of someone who texted goodnight or asked how their day was, but of someone who saw them and stayed. Someone who brought peace into their chaos. Someone who didn't try to fix them, but gently reminded them they didn't have to stay broken. And that's when it hits them, you weren't just someone, you were the one. Not because you chased them, but because after everything you walked away with your dignity intact. You became unforgettable the moment you stopped trying to be remembered. Because the truth is, when someone finally sees you as irreplaceable, it's often when they realize they let go of something they'll never find again. People with avoidant attachment styles often struggle to process emotional intimacy in real time. They can be warm, even loving, but when things get too close, when someone begins to matter deeply, they subconsciously recoil. The closeness feels threatening, even if you've done nothing but love them. This isn't about you, it's about how they've learned to survive emotional discomfort. So instead of leaning in, they pull back. Instead of expressing appreciation, they keep you at arm's length. And in that distance, it's easy to start believing that they don't see your value. That maybe somehow you're just another person passing through their life, that you're forgettable, replaceable. But that's not the full story. The avoidant doesn't typically process loss like most people do. They don't immediately miss you the day you leave. Instead, they often experience a delay, a lag in emotional recognition. At first, your absence feels like relief. They finally have the space they've been craving, but slowly and often quietly, something else sets in. The silence begins to echo. The routines change. The person who once offered stability, empathy, kindness, that person is no longer there. At first, they might dismiss the discomfort. Tell themselves it's just a shift, a phase, but over time, the absence reveals something they never allowed themselves to fully confront when you were around, that what you offered wasn't ordinary, that the connection wasn't transactional, that the way you listened, supported, challenged, and cared was rare. Avoidants often protect themselves from pain by minimizing others' importance. If they convince themselves no one is truly needed, they never have to face the risk of needing someone. So they rationalize your leaving. They tell themselves someone else will come along, that you weren't that different. But that logic cracks when the reality sets in. The space you once filled doesn't feel the same with anyone else. They start to see that your presence had depth, and that not everyone offers what you did. Not everyone makes them feel safe and seen without pressure. That's when they realize you weren't just a placeholder. You weren't filling time. You were a force in their life, offering what they didn't know how to ask for, but deeply needed. And now that you're gone, they can't just insert someone new and feel whole again. Because what they lost was never about convenience, it was about connection. And connection like that doesn't reappear on demand. There's a pivotal moment in every emotionally unbalanced relationship when you stop trying to be understood and start choosing yourself. It doesn't happen dramatically. There's no fireworks or big declarations. More often, it happens quietly after one too many ignored messages, one too many moments where your needs were brushed aside, or one too many times you felt invisible in someone else's world. You reach a place where proving your worth feels exhausting, and the desire to be chosen fades into the deeper need to choose peace. That's the moment people often mistake for giving up. But it's not giving up, it's waking up. When you're in a dynamic with someone avoidant, your empathy becomes a double-edged sword. You understand their fear of closeness. You see the little signs of their struggle. And because you care, you extend patience. You try to meet them where they are, hoping that love will eventually create safety. You think, if I can just love them well enough, consistently enough, they'll realize I'm not a threat. And for a while, you make that your mission, earning trust, proving loyalty, softening every harsh edge they show you. But over time, something starts to shift, not in them, but in you. You begin to notice that while you've been showing up for them, you've been abandoning yourself. Your own emotional needs have been left unmet, not because they didn't exist, but because you've been too focused on managing someone else's comfort. That realization doesn't come with resentment at first, it comes with sadness. The sadness of knowing you've tolerated crumbs while hoping for a feast. The sadness of realizing that in trying so hard to not scare them away, you've silenced your own voice. Choosing yourself in that moment isn't about punishing them. It's not some silent treatment or manipulative exit strategy. It's about self-respect. It's about recognizing that love cannot thrive in a space where your needs are consistently minimized. That your worth isn't something that should have to be proven again and again. You start to understand that loving someone shouldn't require sacrificing your emotional well-being. And that maybe, just maybe, the most loving thing you can do for both of you is walk away. Not with bitterness, but with clarity. Because sometimes the most powerful form of self-love is no longer trying to convince someone of your value when they've made a habit of overlooking it. There's a quiet kind of power in letting go without fanfare, in walking away not because you want to be chased, but because you finally realize that staying would only cost you your self-worth. People often think that what makes someone irreplaceable is how long they hold on, how much they're willing to fight, or how far they're willing to go to keep a connection alive. But the truth is, you don't become unforgettable by clinging to something that's slipping through your fingers. You become unforgettable when you stop trying to be seen and instead allow yourself to be gone. The avoidant doesn't always register your value when you're in front of them. They may appreciate you in moments, but they don't fully digest the weight of your presence because their coping mechanism is to stay emotionally distant. So when you continue to show up checking in, being patient, showing care without demanding too much, they begin to take that energy for granted. Not necessarily out of malice, but because they've convinced themselves that intimacy is optional, even overwhelming. And when someone is always there, it's easy to believe they'll never leave. That's why your departure hits differently. Because it's not loud, it's not reactive, it's not about proving a point, it's calm. Grounded, certain, you no longer chase clarity or beg for recognition. You don't craft long explanations hoping they'll finally understand. You just stop showing up in places where your presence isn't valued. You don't slam the door, you simply stop knocking. And it's in that silence that your presence suddenly becomes louder than ever. The avoidant expects conflict. They know how to tune out emotional noise, but they don't expect quiet resolve. They don't expect the person who once made effort after effort to suddenly go still. And that's when the realization sets in. You weren't asking for too much, you were giving too much. Your patience, your empathy, your consistency, those things weren't common, and they certainly weren't replaceable. They were the quiet foundation that made everything feel steady, even if they didn't acknowledge it at the time. You see, letting go with dignity doesn't just protect your peace, it elevates your value. It forces others to confront what they overlooked. You weren't trying to be extraordinary, but by walking away from a dynamic that diminished you, you became exactly that. You became the one they didn't fully appreciate until your silence showed them everything your words never could. Silence has a weight to it that words often can't carry. When you've been in a relationship with someone avoidant, you become used to doing the emotional labor. You fill the space, reach out, initiate connection, ask the questions, offer the comfort. Your voice becomes the thread holding things together, even if the other person barely notices how tightly you're weaving it. But when that thread is gone, when your voice disappears from the conversation entirely, that absence speaks louder than any argument, louder than any emotional plea. It becomes impossible to ignore. Avoidants are skilled at tuning out emotional noise. They're masters at compartmentalizing feelings, especially when those feelings require vulnerability. When things get too close, they pull back not because they don't care, but because closeness triggers discomfort they don't know how to handle. So while you're expressing your needs, they're often retreating into silence. While you're seeking connection, they're seeking control through distance. And as long as you're the one trying, reaching, and speaking, they can maintain that distance. They don't have to confront anything, they know you'll be there. But everything changes when you go quiet. When you stop texting first. When you no longer explain what's wrong. When you no longer try to fix what's broken. That silence isn't passive, it's powerful. It forces them to sit with the space you once filled. And that space isn't empty, it's full of everything they overlooked. It's full of memories, support, consistency, and care. It's full of your effort now missing. And that absence becomes a mirror. Not the kind that flatters, but the kind that reveals. In the stillness, they begin to feel what your presence truly meant. Not just someone to talk to, but someone who listened. Not just someone who showed up, but someone who stayed even when they pushed you away. The absence becomes unsettling. because no one is stepping in to fill it with the same warmth, patience, or emotional depth. That's when they realize it wasn't just about having someone, it was about having you. You didn't leave to hurt them. You didn't stay silent to manipulate. You left the conversation because it became one-sided. And your silence more than your words ever could makes them finally feel the weight of what they lost. Not just a relationship, but a connection that can't be replicated. They begin to understand that some presences can't be replaced and some silences are permanent. And that's the truth most people only understand too late, when the silence becomes louder than all the words they once ignored. When someone avoidant finally realizes you were never replaceable, it's not because you forced them to see it. It's because your absence showed them what your presence so gently gave: consistency, patience, and love that didn't ask to be earned but still deserved to be cherished. You didn't walk away because you stopped caring. You walked away because you started caring about yourself just as much. That's not weakness. That's growth. That's strength. And ironically, that's often the moment you become unforgettable, not by staying longer, but by knowing when to leave with grace. So to anyone who has loved deeply, given fully, and walked away quietly, know this: your worth doesn't decrease just because someone else couldn't see it clearly. You were never replaceable, and you never will be. Thank you for giving me your time and your heart today. Take care of yourself the way you wish others would, and trust that the right people will recognize what's rare about you. Goodbye for now, and thank you again.